I'm joined on YouTube by my co-host Harry Henriquez. Good evening to you, Harry.
Good evening, neighbor. Good evening, neighbor rights and everybody.
Little bit of,
Respect Harry.
little bit of echo there for you, Harry, over on YouTube. Are you all right, sir?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine, neighbor.
Comfortable over there?
Well, let's see how comfortable it gets tonight.
Okay, Harry. Jump in whenever you want. But let me ask you, Harry. Melissa Harry gave the PNP its best chance in a decade. I think so. A crisis that should have exhausted the government. Nara took that chance away, Harry. The bill's financing structure give the administration resources plus agency. Harry, how was the government able to secure this large amount of financing to fund this reconstruction? How did they do it?
Well, neighbor, it's a series of events. It is backed by discipline. You know, in fact, this is the administration that will be known as the best financially and fiscally responsible and disciplined administration in Jamaica's history as it stands. Because if we date it back to any one of the administrations before this one, there's none that has been this disciplined and gotten the results through being that disciplined. Now, it's the major things from it why they're able.
Before you go on, Harry, help me a little bit. Would the Portia Simpson Miller administration or even the Bruce Golding administration before them be able to attract this funding?
They wouldn't have been in the position to do so.
They would not.
They would not. Because let me just, give synopsis of both, right? Bruce Golding's administration would have had to make it to this time, right, to achieve what the Andrew Holness administration have, which also means they would have probably gone through, if we're supposed to give them 10 years, that would take them to the starting of this one, 2015, thereabout. It simply means they would have to have maintained, the IMF deals. They would have to be a lot more tighter, or rather tighter, fiscally than even Andrew Holness's administration, because of the time we were coming out of. The greatest depression in 100 years, Jamaica, and the thing about that, right? It is less so the time frame of that depression, and more so the state that Jamaica was in, why they couldn't handle that depression, why it was worse than a lot of nations, right? Because we didn't have the culture. We were just trying to develop that culture. In fact, we didn't even get a few months good before we were hit by that recession. So Jamaicans didn't know what that was like.
Yes.
And then we didn't have the financial structuring. Because remember, the IMF was who came in and gave us the financials, give that financial sector the structure that it needed. Not wanted, not a choice, but it needed to have gotten those frameworks put in for the financial structure because of what happened in the 90s, which eroded that level of in the infancy stage of developing a proper financial sector. And everybody knows the financial sector in a country is what truly shows its strength. Because if you have a weak financial sector, it leads towards insufficiencies in other areas, deficiency in areas as well, in different sectors that may not be getting funding. And it spans right across the board. We've seen that when it comes down to security and fighting crime in Jamaica. We were using pennies to try and fight a dollar war, right? So in that time, Jamaica was just getting into the gear of, let's go on this path to being disciplined, the whole aspect of the bitter medicine. And Jamaica never really liked that, right? Because they didn't know what being disciplined was. a culture was created for the longest time, 2 decades thereabout, of handouts, of depending on politicians, of depending on an individual rather than a system from the government. What we're seeing with Andrew Holness administration is that they want and they're pushing for people to depend on the systems and framework put in place, as opposed to an independent individual, a politician, a member of parliament, or who you know. They want the system to do its job, something it should have done since we got independence, which we had a lot of mismanagement that failed the people in that manner.
Yes.
Now, looking in terms of for what Bruce Golding administration had to deal with, they wouldn't have been able to reach here just yet, right? Now, if I take it a little over, because really and truly was down to the people. They were just getting into a little transition period. Of course, the People's National Party got their hands back because the people reverted to them, reverted to familiarity because they didn't understand the change, a change that they need, but it is unfamiliar to them. So they go back to the necessary evil that they know. And that happens with human beings, but right throughout history. So
Yes.
it is not alarming. Well, definitely for me, it's not, because I know how that is. And we can look at it, each individual who may want to question, look at yourself. Sometimes you go to the familiar grounds rather than challenge yourself to go to better pastures. You know what the end result can be, but the process is not familiar to you. And as such, it requires a different output from you that you also second guess if you have. So rather go back to the evil that we know, and that's what Jamaica did with the Portia Sims administration in that time, why they got in.
Yes.
Now IMF came in and restructure. They didn't ask what to be done. They gave an ultimatum. You want this money? This is what you have to do. And this is the timeline you have to do it. Right? Now, for those who will run come, because we know you'll have the die-hearted and so on, neighbor coming in. Yes, Jamaica had somewhat in the legal framework. I'll give that to Matt Golding because he played a role in that. But it is both government, opposition, and other stakeholders that helped the legislative framework. But the truth is, the overarching system and demands was done by the IMF. So we had to find a way, no matter what happens.
We want to learn this, Harry. Very important. So what you are saying is that to enter into an IMF arrangement, the IMF provides technical support that
Yes.
that countries have to take on. It's tied to the loan itself.
It is.
Some of the things that we did is not we come up with them. The IMF say you have to do this.
Right. And what happens that when they say, let's say, they look at us and say, okay, what was one of the main things that was happening in Jamaica, neighbor, coming out of the 90s, early 2000s, was that, the whole interest rate being extremely high. And as such, money came in from overseas, foreign investments, went to these instruments. Most of the time, they were fixed instruments and also government bonds. Now, government bonds, in essence, is really the government borrowing money from an individual, from an institution, anybody who invests in it. So the government is the borrower, and the other persons, most of the times being foreign investors, were the lenders. And this money was used to fill the gaps in the budget, and we normally had a huge gap in our budgets. Regardless of how many taxes was placed on the Jamaican people, there was always a large gap there. So we had a lot of government bonds putting out fixed instruments, certificate of deposits, debentures, these kind of instruments right across the board. But the problem with this was that the interest rate was so high for Jamaica that foreign investors could have changed the money to Jamaican, right? And then when they got their return, change it back again, so foreign exchange, and they would still beat most of the world that was giving interest. Jamaica rate was still higher despite that conversion. So it showed how ridiculous it was for Jamaica. But this money did not create any production whatsoever. There's no productivity because it goes to these instruments, right? And then it leaves back. So it didn't stimulate any economical growth. And that was what hurt the financial sector. No, the IMF said that had to be done away with. So what we had was a lot of cash, neighbor, sitting there, nowhere to go. And the IMF said, listen, you have to put different framework in place. So you have to now create an avenue for this money to go somewhere. And that was one of the major key things why the Jamaica Stock Exchange rose to prominence in that time. So it wasn't that we were exceptional. It was key driven things instituted by Jamaica. The IMF played a big deal on that. And yes, the brokers and private sector and so on, they did what they had to do. They didn't really have a choice, because if you want to stay in the game, you adapt or you die. And when you go into business, you don't ever want to die. You want to make money. And as such, a lot of that money now, neighbor, was diverted into the stock exchange, because now you have to find somewhere. Interest rate now was going down lower. So you can't get the same level of ridiculous returns that you could just by what I call set it and leave it version of investments. So now we saw that rose to prominence. And that was one of the results of the IMF. In fact, one of the biggest, because what that did, neighbor, was force the financial framework to be built out faster and try to put some level of trust that was eroded in Jamaica because of what happened in the 90s. Now, that created a little stimulus for businesses to try and come back a little. They can now get capital, from this area. And as such, we started to see some stimulation. That is why when you heard Aldershot at the time say, listen, we can get cheaper money elsewhere. That was what he was alluding to, because we were committing to foreign investors high interest rates, and it wasn't doing anything for the country, when the truth is you could have gone to borrow at single digit, because our interest rates were like 20%. Sometimes it was 10 to 15% higher than the next best investment. And Jamaica didn't have. So it was that true reflection of confidence in Jamaica. It was more of a backdoor that you saw as an investor, because I can't blame the investors here. You see an opportunity, you take it and you run with it, right? But it didn't do anything for the country. And Aldershot looked at all of that and said we could have gotten money for less. The government could have committed to less in terms of interest rate and less stress on the people's back. And he showed Jamaicans that it could have been done, right? Now, when we look at what was happening now with IMF said we had to do XYZ. And this is the layout I'll give you. How you implement it is up to you. That is where, the stakeholders come into place. The government, you'll have your Mark Goldings for legislation and so on. That was the level that they played. So you'll hear them come and say, oh, it wasn't IMF. And they will talk up this section that I'm speaking about as if it was the great part of it. No. You were given an ultimatum and you do it or you don't get the money. So you had to force it and find ways. You were put on the back bench to say, listen, do this or else. And most times, neighbor, nobody wants the or else. So they'll find ways. They will do what they have to do. And that was key. And the IMF laid out that framework and they ensured that they give it a timeline, which was why we saw that happening. But nothing really happened under the Portia Simpson administration, because it was on an automatic thing. You had these things laid out that you had to achieve. You have no choice. So you weren't governing Jamaica really, because you wanted, in order to have the power to say you're leading Jamaica or you're the prime minister and you're the ruling party, you had to do what another country technically wanted.
Yeah. So you are saying, Harry, that because I think this has been left out of the discussion, Jamaica's ability to attract this amount of resources is a testament to what exactly? Why were we able to get this money?
It was a testament to how strong leadership came into the fray, how discipline over, we have the thing we said to party with the rent money. It was doing what you have to in order to do what you want to eventually. We're not there to the last party yet. But in order to claw back Jamaica from the depths of financial hell, because remember, the quote didn't fall lightly that we're becoming the Greece of the West, which means we were being almost worse than Argentina. Argentina is one of the worst setup when it comes on to the financial aspect in the West right now.
But
Greece had to be bailed out. Go ahead, neighbor.
no. I'm just listening to. I'm just listening. Go ahead, man.
So Greece had to be bailed out, I believe, by Germany, which means they were given more than a lifeline. That was the trajectory of Jamaica. If IMF didn't come, because IMF saw the potential of Jamaica and a neighbor, right? People, let's not fool ourselves. We are one of the most strategic and best positioned country geographically. We are set between, going in terms of Africa, the transatlantic trade area, where they're closer to the trade coming from the Panama Canal, and that goes right up to North America. That is a heavenly position geographically. It means you can tap into anywhere. Latin America and South America, we know we're going to be emerging markets. Anybody who is in the space that didn't know that was going to be a thing wasn't looking in the future. This administration saw that as well. So they were working around to try and get that done. And what they saw was we have to be better fiscally first. We have to find a way to get down our debt to be considered. We had to also be able to change the minds of people on how money works. We also had to change the mind to say, listen, you have to be prudent in how you go about your day-to-day lives. Yes, you may not necessarily get the glamour life that you thought you'd have, but if you make these sacrifices, you'll be at ease a little better. You'll be exposed to more resources, and eventually the standard of living will be better. But we have to do these things, and the government went about it very strategically, right? So much that we saw funding for different sectors being increased, different ministries getting money, right? So when we hear of people, saying things about the government should have done this earlier, done something sooner, no, everything is a process, and you can't, if you don't finish process A, you can't go to process B. This is that game where you can skip to a different stage. This is real life, and you had to achieve the things set out yearly in order to do so. So one of the major things was that removal of the BOJ from the government, that had to be done. That was something countries who want to move forward had to ensure they reduce the potential influence. I won't say corruption, but the potential influence of a government on its central bank. You always want that to stand independent, and this administration achieved that with Nigel Clark, which showed it was forward thinking, right? But they had to do a lot of things in order to achieve just that. And that was a power move, but you couldn't have done something like that before its time.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have the framework for it to stand and to be effective, right? So much that it's so good, neighbor. We hear the opposition spokesperson on finance wanted to borrow $1 billion from BOJ if they were in power. So it shows that it works. It also shows the people that, listen, we're going to be aggressive on this debt so we can be more attractive, right? So that people can look at us now in a light to say we're not borrowing our way back to the depths of financial hell. We are strapping our bellies, we're banning, as Jamaicans have said, ban the belly, neighbor, right? And push through. We know what survival mode was like, but this is now being disciplined as a nation, as a unit, in order to achieve something going forward. I don't see where the previous two administration would have been able to achieve this at this level, because one of the things Andrew Holness had over both in terms of Bruce Golding and Miss Portia Simpson Miller was that he knew how to get the private sector involved. This is the first time, from my understanding, what I've seen and studied, the private sector is disinvolved with the government. They're integral. The technocrats are coming left, right, and center. Recruiting is a key setup in the administration, and it gave that blend as to how the country can move forward. So we didn't have just people within the area that are like-minded. These were persons exposed globally, because we're now in a global market. So anything you're doing as a government You can't just think for just the country or just the region. You have to see how you can have a big play or a say globally. How you, whatever you put in place, how does it position the country on the global scale? And we were able to do that where people saw crime as the biggest deterrent for investors, for sectors to grow. And when I say investor, I'm not just speaking about foreign investors, neighbor. I'm speaking locally. Because
Yes.
a man will have the money, probably if he put up a business, he might have to go pay extortion. And that is money lost. He knows now, if you look in the period, neighbor, for Jamaica, if you and I went ahead a decade ago, let's say from 2000 to 2016, we could have set up a security business and become multimillionaires, because that is where Jamaica was going. Everybody had to be invested into security, whether it be cameras, security systems. If you look at that time frame and see the rise of security companies, you knew where Jamaica was going. And that was $1 billion industry. And that is me making it underwhelming. But this administration has shown that how they've been able to be better fiscally and financially. They were able to now pump money to fight the monster that deterred its very people living within to try and expand. Because if you open a business, neighbor, you get free. Everybody think a businessman or entrepreneur rich because you open a business. Even when the business is break even, and now you have to be paying extortion and so on, which kills a business. That has been eroded, and it's going down slowly but surely. We got a big drop. Credit to them. Definitely the work is paying off. But it shows that people are now getting that investment power in Jamaica. We see businesses coming to the market showing more strength, right? We're seeing diaspora investing more. So it's not just remittances. Yes, remittances is still our number one, but people are now putting back into Jamaica. We see senior citizens, want to come back to Jamaica to give their time, to give their skill sets that they've learned elsewhere, and to help Jamaica grow again. That is a testament to how well this government has put things in place to bring that national pride and confidence back, which translated globally for people seeing that Jamaica finally can realize some of its potential going forward, and they don't want to miss out on that opportunity.
Fantastic, fantastic, Harry. I think you've revealed so much there, and that there's so much I could ask you, but boy, time.